BBC presents My Word. And here to introduce the programme and the panel is Jack Longland.
My Word is a word game played by people whose business is words, and those taking part are Dilys Powell, Nancy Spain, Frank Muir, and Dennis Norton. This is round one, and it tests their vocabulary. 2 marks if they get the meanings of these words more or less right. Beginning with Nancy Spain. Nancy, what are marginalia?
Marginalia are the things, the notes that are written after the main work has been written, annotations or footnotes.
Yes, but what you do, Nancy, probably.
What I do?
You go around the public library and you write in the margin of thrillers, the butler done it.
That's it.
Nancy can't tell butter from marginalia.
Yes, you're the one who has to be rubbed out, Nancy, after you return your library book. It's what you write in the margin. 2 marks. Hank Muir, what is roborite?
Yes, this was first used, I think, by Captain Bligh.
Yes, you're getting...
Do you remember when when they mutinied and they flung him into the whaler and tossed him overboard, and he said, "Cast me adrift in an open boat, would you? 2,000 miles from land with only able seaman Blight with me, but we'll get there. Row, Blight." And ever since then, it has been used.
Well,
in various senses.
Not quite. No, it's a lovely story for the silver screen, but
as an explosive, Dilys says.
Yes. You want to stick to that?
Yes. We're not too close. It's not a limpet mine, it's just an ordinary explosive.
There you creep home. 2 marks. It's a strong, flameless explosive, and it comes from the Latin word meaning strength, because it's so strong. Dilys Powell, what is earth?
It's something I can't speak.
Yes?
I think they speak it in Ireland. It's a language.
Yes, that's approximately right.
Celtic language.
Celtic language, yes.
It's rather the same as Gaelic.
That's better.
Better, is it?
2 marks. It's Highland Gaelic. The Irish simply hate it if you say they speak Erse, because they think they speak Gaelic. But Erse is a sort of early Scottish word meaning Irish, and most people use it for the Irish form of Gaelic. But the Irish don't like it. So Highland Gaelic is right. Dennis Norton, what is a paravane?
Oh, yes, it's a ship thing. It's naval. It gets towed.
Yes?
Underneath ships. Yes. Yes, it did, because when we went to New York, when Frank and I went to New York, it was so much to go first class, a little bit less to go second class, a little bit less to go steerage, and we went paravane.
It's in minesweeper.
Yes, they in the war they had them. They put them underneath ships, and it was something to do with minesweepers had them. I don't know quite what they did, but they were...
Yes, could you hazard a guess of what it was for? I mean, while you were travelling on it.
Well, they did something to mines.
Yes. It's shaped like a torpedo. It was towed either by a minesweeper or, as Dennis says, by any other vessel in wartime, and it was supposed to cut the moorings of a moored submerged mine, so it didn't sort of blow you up. It bobbed harmlessly to the surface, invented in the First War. Well, before we begin round 2, I give each team a quotation for them to write down, and I want the 2 women members of the team to keep on studying those quotations during the programme, and then at the end I ask them where the quotations come from. And Nancy Spain with Dennis Norton, here's your quotation. 2 blacks do not make a white. And Dilys Powell with Frank Muir, yours is my bonnie lies over the ocean. And then at the end of the programme I shall ask Dennis and Frank to give me their ideas of how these words really came to be said or written. And I don't want any of these answers now. The next round is all about verse and poetry, and I give each member of each team a quotation and ask them to go on with it, a couple of lines or so. 2 marks if they can complete the quotation, and 2 more if they can say author and where it comes from. Beginning with Nancy Spain. Ye distant spires, ye antique towers that crown the watery glade.
That's distant prospect, of grey. And it ends up where every prospect pleases and any man is vile.
Doesn't end up with that.
Well, eventually arrives at it.
It ends no more where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. Yes. Well, 2 marks anyway. Thomas Gray's, the opening lines of Ode on Distant Prospect of Eton College. You can't complete it, can you?
No, I think it's a sort of description of the people in the foreground, people playing cricket and so on.
That comes later, I think. 2 out of 4, I think, Nancy. Ye distant spires, ye antique towers that crown the watery glade, where grateful science still adores her Henry's holy shade. Henry being the king. Now, Frank Muir. The Ballyshannon foundered off the coast of Caribou, and down in fathoms many went the captain and the crew.
On all you other captains, don't make the same mistake. Don't let your dinghy dangle in the wake. We are of the opinion, in concert here, that Gilbert wrote it. Gilbert who is there?
William Shakespeare.
William Shakespeare Gilbert, W.S.
William Schwenk Gilbert.
Good soldier Schwenk.
Yes. Comes from the Bab Ballads, etiquette. You're not going to get the next 2 lines, so 2 out of 4. The Ballyshannon foundered off the coast of Caribou, and down in fathoms many went the captain and the crew. Down went the owners, greedy men whom hope of gain allured. Oh, dry the starting tear, for they were heavily insured. Typical Gilbert sentiment. Nice line comes later on the same poem. He had often eaten oysters, but had never had enough, which I think is a great truth. Now to Lisboa. Alas, what boots it with incessant care to tend the homely, slighted shepherd's trade, and strictly meditate the thankless muse?
Were it not better done as others use?
Yes.
To sport with Amaryllis in the shade?
Yes.
Or with the tangled tresses of Neaera's hair? Is that
Well
enough?
done.
Is that enough?
Yes, that's fine.
Enough. That's...
Yes.
Prize of author.
Milton.
Yes. Poem.
Lycidas.
Yes, well done. Milton's Lycidas. 4 marks it is. Now, Dennis Norden. This is a surprising and I think, to my mind, a slightly unfair one. Small showers last long, but sudden storms are short. He tires betimes that spurs too fast betimes. With eager feeding, food doth choke the feeder. And I'm going to say that the next bit, about 3 lines later, is so well known that you'll know it by heart.
Shakespeare.
Yes?
I'm amazed I've got this far.
It's not a very well-known play, that's for sure.
Well, it's fairly well known.
But the next bit is very well known.
Well, there are a couple of lines which go on the same way as I've described, and then you start up with something which is frightfully well known. A bit geographical.
Well, it's not Hamlet. It doesn't come
It's
anywhere
not
in
Hamlet,
No, that's for sure.
Nor Macbeth, nor King Lear.
I think I better just give you 1 mark for getting Shakespeare. It's Shakespeare's Richard II. It's Old Gaunt, John of Gaunt. It is dying speech. It starts like this.
Precious stone of King.
That's right, 2 lines later. Small showers last long, but sudden storms are short. He tires betimes that spurs too fast betimes. With eager feeding, food doth choke the feeder. Light vanity, insatiate cormorant, consuming means soon preys upon itself. And then there's a deep breath not put in the text.
And off we go.
This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars. It doesn't sort of, to me, fit on very well. That's why I thought it was a bit
It's
unfair.
like asking for the verse of Red Sails in the Sunset.
All right, 1 out of 4. Well, the next round is origins and derivations of phrases which are in pretty common use. I want to know 2 things about them. What do they mean now, and how did they originate? Beginning with Nancy Spain, to put the kibosh on. I think some people call it kibosh, but I've always called it kibosh.
It means the absolute finish to anything.
Yes.
Rather like a dunce's cap put down on top of some body or something.
Yes?
And I've always thought it was Yiddish.
I don't think so.
The kibosh.
It's French. Quelle bouche.
Quelle bouche.
What a mouth, what a mouth.
What a mouth is it? It's obvious. No, Russian?
No.
No. Russian.
2, I think, out of 4. As Nancy quite rightly says, the phrase to put the kibosh on now means to put an end to get rid of, or to defeat or knock on the head. But the more likely of the 2 origins, because the other one seems to be frightfully far-fetched, is from Irish. Kibosh, or sibosh, is an Irish word meaning the cap of death. And when you put that on, well, finish, curtains, so on. But there is a most fantastic theory that it used to mean Portland cement, which some sculptors used to blow onto their otherwise nice sculptured work to give it a sort of rough cast, chiaroscuro effect. So putting the kibosh on would mean to sort of blanket or smother the original effect. I don't believe much in that myself. 2 out of 4, I think. Frank Muir. To lay by the heels.
Means to capture, to render powerless.
Yes?
Yes?
Yeah, 2 for that, yes. But how did it start? I mean, why did it come to mean that?
To lay by the heels. Where else could a hen deposit the egg?
I've been upside down.
No, it's nothing to do with Achilles, is it?
No.
The well-known heel.
You only had 1, not 2.
I just render myself baffled.
Try putting in the stocks.
Yes, now you're getting there.
Try putting in the stocks.
Try putting in the stocks.
I will, and it's right. In other words, lay by the heels is to capture and render powerless is what it is now, but it simply refers to the stocks which used to stand in every town or village, and they were caught by their heels and they sat in the stocks. Then to Lispow, Baedeker raids.
Well, Baedeker was a German gentleman, who gave his name to a great series of guidebooks.
Yes. And how did he denote something that was, as you would say, sehenswürdig, or worth seeing?
He gave it a star, I should think.
And several stars.
Several stars, yes.
All right.
Vol de détour.
2 marks for Baedeker, who was one of the, or perhaps the most famous tourist guidebook writer of all. And the first chapter starts starring things that he thought were worthwhile. It's been copied by all sorts of people since then. But the Baedeker raids, for the name given to the German air raids on places of beauty and historic interest in the British Isles, things like Bath and Canterbury and Norwich and so on, and they were supposed to be by the Luftwaffe in revenge for raids by the RAF and so on Cologne and Lübeck and pretty German cities. Dennis Norden, to cast sheep's eyes.
Well, it means to look at somebody all sort of doughy, like. Doesn't it?
Yes, that's all right.
To cast,
And why do you do it?
Why do, to look at them like a sheep, I suppose.
Yes.
Unless it's your first sort of overture towards the opposite sex, or mine was anyway, you buy 2 penn'orth of bull's eyes. I don't know whether sort of in medieval times they were called sheep's eyes.
Yes, I think you're getting very close to it.
Well, that's what they did. You bought them sheep's eyes instead of bull's eyes.
And where will you find the sheep's eyes?
What's the other end from the tail?
Think yourself into a country in which that might not be too difficult to do.
Arabia.
Yes.
In Arabia, you could give the eye... Oh, horrible. It's the great delicacy, isn't it?
That's it.
Yeah.
And you did it because...
Because you admired them. It was
Yes,
a
that's
token of affection.
Well done,
respect.
Dennis. You get your 4 marks. It means now to look in a sheepish and perhaps rather sloppy sort of way at someone that you think is marvellous and to whom you're lovingly inclined. And it's suggested that the origin may have come from the East because at these Arab feasts and tents and what have you, the host would put his fingers into the communal stew and fetch out a sheep's eye and give it to somebody whom he particularly admired and liked. It was the great delicacy.
Managed to cast them sounds like he threw them at them.
Had to have your mouth open for that, I think. And so we come to the last round and return to the quotations I gave the 2 teams earlier in the programme, beginning with Nancy Spain. Nancy, for 2 marks, can you give me the origin of your quotation, 2 blacks do not make a white?
I'm very sorry, no, I can't, Jack. Not even for 4 marks.
I think it's a difficult one. It was originally a proverb, and it's mentioned in Scottish proverbs in the 18th century, but it is quoted by a well-known author, by Bernard Shaw, in The Adventures of the Black Girl and Her Search for God, when he says, "Do not forget that 2 blacks do not make a white." Sorry, I can't mark you. To Miss Powell, I'd like the origin of your quotation. My bonnie lies over the ocean.
It's a song. My
Yes?
bonnie lies over the ocean, my bonnie lies over the sea. And there's something about bring back, oh, bring back my bonnie to me.
Yes. Oh, winds that blow over the ocean, oh, bring back my bonnie to me. That's the song.
I think it's about Bonnie Prince Charlie.
It's supposed to be, yes, it's supposed to refer to him. I think that's good enough. It is, in fact, traditional song. Nobody knows the author, but it has been associated with Flora MacDonald and Prince Charlie going away and not coming back again. Will you know, come back again? That kind of thing. 2, I think. Well, now I am going to ask Dennis Norden and Frank Muir to give me their explanations of how these 2 quotations came into being, and on this occasion the marks will go to whichever unlikely explanation receives the longer amount of applause from the audience in the studio. So, back to Dennis Norden and his quotation, 2 blacks do not make a white.
Do you know how many Scotsmen are employed in this country on making bread? You're all giving hints throughout the programme, you see. Nobody knows this one. Now, this one I do know, because at one period of my career, a career devoted to the service of mankind and womankind, every kind actually, but I was a statistician, and I worked for an organisation called Trend Spotters Limited. Now, this is a very important organisation in our present-day economy. And in fact, it was important for them to know statistics about everything. In fact, to find out things to find statistics about. And every Monday morning we used to have a conference in AJ's office. AJ was the chief statistician. He'd been married 1.3 times, had 3.8 children. And he used to say, all right, gang, what can we find statistics about this week? And somebody would say, well, AJ, what about finding the percentage of bicycle pumps sold in undeveloped areas by bow-legged assistants? AJ would say, great, out on the job. And that was how I got this assignment, to find out how many ginger-headed Scotsmen were employed in making bread. Well, I spent 8 months on this, scouring bakeries, big and small, throughout the length and breadth, particularly the breadth, obviously, you see, of the country. And at the end of the 8 months, I came up with a most startling conclusion. I went through all my figures, and I found that there were no ginger-headed Scotsmen employed in making bread. In fact, there were no Scotsmen at all employed in making bread in this country. Now, this was terribly exciting because it's what they call a nil return, which is very, very dearly beloved of statisticians. If you can come up with the answer no, and every time you get one of these, a bell rings in the statistics office, you see, and we had a big party then, and we were discussing this startling thing about there being no Scotsmen employed in making bread, and somebody said, why are there no Scotsmen employed in making bread? He got fired immediately. You see, statisticians do. They get fired immediately if they ask why, you see, because that might make things simpler. You know? But it worried me, and I got to thinking, why are there no Scotsmen employed in making bread? And I did a thing which, well, it was risky, because if it had been found out, I would have had to turn in my statistician's bag and my notebook, my ready reckoner, everything, you see. I went and asked a baker. I said, why don't you ever employ Scotsmen in making bread? And he said, well, the answer's very simple. He said, it takes 2 men to make a tray of white loaves. Now, he said, suppose I employ 2 Scotsmen, real Scotsmen, the one with kilts. He said, you know what happens? He said, there's only one working in there making the white loaves. The other one's always outside standing over the grating. Now, you've seen these baker's gratings with the blasts of hot air coming up. Will you imagine wearing a kilt? Wouldn't you? You see, that is exactly why no Scotsmen are ever entrusted with the making of white loaves. In other words, as they say, 2 Macs do not bake a white.
I suspect that an angry army of Scottish bakers is already crossing the border. We'd better go on to the second quotation for Frank Muir, which was, if you remember, "My bonnet lies over the ocean."
I think I owe it to the listening public, certainly to myself, to explain to you why I wasn't made Director General of the BBC. You see, I wrote and offered myself. I was lying in bed one afternoon, and I thought, I was lying there lacing and unlacing my toes, and I thought I would make a good Director General of the BBC. So I wrote to them, and I told them all about myself. I wrote to the governors, and they wrote an awfully nice letter back and said they were curious to see me, and would I come for an interview? And I was tremendously encouraged by this, so I put on my sincerest suit, which was a sort of brown suit, rather neat one, and I caught the train to Waterloo, and I was doing the Times crossword on the way. I didn't start it, actually, but when I got to Waterloo, I didn't want to waste the crosswords. I hadn't even started it. So I decided to cut it out and put it in my pocket. Luckily, I had a cutter with me. It's sort of razor blade in a plastic thing, and it's actually for cutting the binding twine on combine harvesters. But I always carry it with me because you never know when somebody comes up to you in the street and says, "Excuse me, but have you such a thing as a thing for cutting binding twine on combine?" You feel such a fool if you haven't got one. So I rested the Times on my knee and I cut the crossword out, folded it and put it in my pocket. It felt strangely thick. And just as I was getting out of the carriage, I felt a sort of cough over my left knee. And there staring at me was a nude knee. I cut a square right out of the knee. And here I was on my way to this interview with the governors, you see, what to do. Now, this was a predicament indeed, because I knew what they'd think of me, walking around with a bare knee. And I had no money to buy another pair of trousers. I had enough. I had 1 and 10pence, just enough to buy a cheese and tomato sandwich and a tin of brown boot polish. I wasn't going to eat the brown boot polish. Well, I wasn't going to eat the cheese and cucumber either, because I like plain sandwiches with nothing in them. But you obviously can't order those, so I order a cheese and cucumber, and then I take the cheese and cucumber out of the sandwich and put it in a little polythene bag, because you never know when somebody might come up to you and say, "Excuse me, but I'm hungry, have you such a thing as a cheese?" And then I eat the bread and butter. And so I had no money to buy the trousers. I didn't know what to do, but I did have the brown boot polish, so I smeared that all over my knee, and that darkened it in, but it was the wrong shade of brown. So I didn't know what to do. I asked several people. There were several people following me at the time, actually, funnily enough. And they just sort of stared and looked at each other and moved a pace back away from me. And then I had a bright idea. I had this cutter, this baling twine cutter in my pocket. So I sat down on the pavement and I cut the legs off my trousers, just leaving me shorts, you see. And it was rather difficult because there were policemen there directing the traffic, and there were quite a few people. People are so interested in each other. That's what I like. There must have been about 50 or 60 people by that time. And but then I stood up and started walking towards the BBC, but of course I had a brown knee now. So what I did was I rubbed the boot polish on the other knee, and I thought I could probably pass it off to the governors. And all was going well, actually, until I discovered that I was walking rather lopsided and I'd lost a shoe. You see, the reason for this is that I have a theory that feet should breathe. So I always buy my shoes 4 sizes too large. It gives me about 1/4 of an inch clearance, and I must have walked out of it, you see, when I was worrying about my predicament, and I only had 1 shoe on. Will you excuse me a moment? I just had a message. Oh, this is really very exciting. ladies and gentlemen. I just had a message here from the control room that the last 5 minutes of this program has been used as a test to beam to one of those communication satellites which is now swinging, orbiting round the Earth. So my story that we've just been listening to is now up there somewhere, and it's being amplified by all these batteries on the thing, ready to be bounced back to Earth. I think this is very exciting, because it was just a lot of nonsense, I suppose I was talking. It was all lies, actually, bare knee stuff. But it is rather exciting to think that at this moment, somewhere out in outer space, my bare knee lies hover the ocean.
Well, I think Frank gets your vote, and I give him the mark. And that brings us to a final score in which Dilys Powell and Frank Muir win by a large margin of 8.5 marks from Nancy Spain and Dennis Norden. And it also brings to an end this edition of My Word.
In My Word, you heard Dilys Powell, Nancy Spain, Frank Muir and Dennis Norden, introduced by Jack Longland. The program was devised by Tony Shryan and Edward J. Mason and presented by the BBC.